You are standing on a beach where the sand is black as ash and swallows your boots with every step. Before you even hear the bullets, you feel the island itself is trying to drag you under. Welcome to Iwo Jima. It's February 1945, and you have just entered a nightmare carved from volcanic rock and fortified with 11 miles of underground tunnels. The enemy you face isn't just dug in, he's vanished beneath the earth, waiting. Have you ever wondered what it was like to fight in a place where the ground itself was a weapon, where 36 days of close-quarter hell consumed nearly 26,000 American lives, and where the Japanese defenders refused to leave until the bitter end? Let's find out. The date is February 19th, 1945. You are somewhere in the vast blue Pacific, a rifle heavy in your hands, staring at a smudge of volcanic rock that rises from the sea, like a rotten pork chop left in the sun. That smudge is Iwo Jima, and in a few hours you will wade onto a beach of black ash that has never once felt the warmth of a friendly footprint. This island, barely 8 square miles of sulfur and stone, holds the only airfields between the Marianas and the Japanese home islands, and your commanders have promised it will fall within 5 days. They are wrong. The man waiting for you on the other side of that beach is Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, and he has spent the last 8 months turning Iwo Jima into a subterranean fortress with 11 miles of tunnels, 1,500 rooms, and guns so well hidden that even the Navy's heaviest shells have barely scratched the surface. For the next 36 days, this black sand will swallow 2 of the bloodiest names in Marine Corps history, the Meat Grinder and Bloody Gorge. Of the 21,000 Japanese soldiers dug into the rock, barely 200 will be taken alive. On your side, nearly 7,000 Americans will never leave, and 20,000 more will be wounded. 1 in 3 of your buddies will become a casualty before the island is declared secure. What you are about to experience is not just a battle. It is a suffocating, underground war fought in darkness and silence, where the line between courage and exhaustion blurs into a single question. How do you survive when the enemy is invisible, the ground itself is a weapon, and every breath tastes of gunpowder and volcanic dust? But first, you have to reach the shore, and the beach already knows you are coming. The landing craft bucks and slams against the gray chop, and every man in your boat is quietly losing a personal war with his own stomach. The ramp isn't even down yet, but you are already breathing through your mouth. Not from seasickness, but from the smell. It's drifting from the island even now, 3/4 of a mile out. A rotten egg reek of sulfur, the volcanic signature of a place that never wanted visitors. Someone vomits, and no one says a word. Overhead, naval shells scream toward the target in a steel rain that has been falling for 3 straight days. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, even the carriers have sent their dive bombers, tipping the island with enough explosives to level a city. From where you are crouched, Iwo Jima looks like an inferno wrapped in smoke, an extinct volcano that seems to have suddenly woken up and decided to die all over again. But here is the first terrible secret you will learn in the next hour. Almost none of that firepower is reaching the men it's meant to kill. While you watched the bombardment from the troop ship and felt a flush of hope, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi watched it from a concrete bunker 90 feet underground, unblinking, undisturbed. He and his 21,000 soldiers had spent 8 months hollowing out the island. 11 miles of tunnels snaking through solid rock. 1,500 rooms spread beneath your feet, dug so deep that even a direct hit from a 16-inch shell felt like distant thunder. The men you were sent to destroy are not huddled in terror. They're waiting, and they have a clear order. Do not fire until the beach is full. This is the moment where you need to understand what Iwo Jima actually is, because the island's story doesn't start with you. It starts with a map inside a B-29 bomber. By late 1944, American superfortresses are finally pounding the Japanese home islands, but they're doing it from the Marianas, a flight so long that damaged planes have nowhere to land. The mathematics of survival are brutal. Lose an engine over Tokyo, and you are ditching in the Pacific, swallowing salt water while your family gets a telegram. Iwo Jima sits exactly halfway between Saipan and Honshu. It has 2 airfields already, with a 3rd under construction. If the Americans take it, their fighters can escort the bombers the whole way. If a B-29 is crippled, it can limp back to the island's emergency strips. The strategic math is so obvious that the Joint Chiefs have stamped Operation Detachment with a simple deadline: take this rock in 5 days. But to understand why 5 days will become 36, you have to meet the man who rewrote the rules of Japanese defense. Tadamichi Kuribayashi is not what the Marine Corps expects. He is not a fanatic screaming about Bushido and Banzai charges. He has lived in America. He rode horses across the Canadian Rockies. He knows the industrial might of the country he is about to fight, and he has concluded that the old tactics, wild frontal assaults on the beach, are suicide against American firepower. So he has done something radical. He has forbidden them. His officers will not lead screaming charges into the surf. They will not die for honor in the first 5 minutes. They will burrow deep, hold their fire, and kill Marines one at a time from positions that don't exist on any map. You won't know any of this as the landing craft grinds to a halt and the ramp slaps down into knee-deep water. What you'll know is the ash. The beach is not sand, it's black volcanic grit, soft as flour and steep as a ski slope. Your boots sink to the ankles. Your pack, already 90 pounds of ammunition, rations, and medical supplies, suddenly feels like a tombstone strapped to your back. Amphibious tractors, designed to crawl over coral reefs, spin their treads uselessly in the fine ash, burning rubber and kicking up clouds that blind the coxswains. Vehicles stall. Men stumble. The entire first wave grinds to a drifting halt. 100,000 tons of war machinery reduced to a panting, cursing traffic jam while Japanese spotters in hidden bunkers calmly count the seconds until the beach is packed tight enough to kill. The first shot, when it comes, is almost gentle. A single machine gun chattering from the base of Mount Suribachi, the volcano that looms at the island's southern tip like a stone sentry. Then another. Then a dozen. The hidden guns that survived the bombardment begin to speak from camouflaged doors carved into the rock, and within seconds the air is a solid wall of noise. The flat crack of Arisaka rifles, the metallic rip of Nambu machine guns, the wet thump of knee mortars dropping shells into the surf. The Marines ahead of you are not fighting, they are flinching. They are digging holes in volcanic ash that collapses the moment you lift your entrenching tool, and they are watching their friends roll sideways with neat red holes stitched across their dungarees. The beach absorbs blood the way it absorbs water, instantly, leaving only a dark stain that fades to brown in the sun. This is the hour that the generals back on the ships will later sanitize with phrases like, "Resistance was unexpectedly heavy." But you are not on the ships. You are pressed flat behind the burned-out carcass of an Amtrak, breathing ash and cordite, listening to a corporal scream for a corpsman who is already dead. The noise is so total that you stop hearing individual sounds. It becomes one continuous roar of physical pressure against your eardrums. You will remember later the strange small details. A helmet floating in the surf, spinning slowly, upright as if its owner is still wearing it. A severed boot with the foot still inside. A photograph, someone's sweetheart, flapping wetly against a rock, already turning to pulp. The smoke is so thick you can taste the island itself. Sulfur, salt, burning rubber, and the hot metal sting of high explosives. And yet, incredibly, the Marines move. They have no choice. The beach offers no cover. The only way out is forward. Inch by inch, squad by squad, they claw their way up the first terrace of black sand, over the bodies of the first wave, into the teeth of a defense that was designed for exactly this moment. Kuribayashi's guns are zeroed on every square yard of beach. His mortars are pre-registered to land where the anthrax bunch up. His heavy artillery, hidden in concrete caves on Suribachi's slopes, can rake the entire landing zone without ever exposing a single muzzle flash. And his men, raised on a code that equates surrender with soul death, are firing with a calm that borders on the religious. The Japanese soldier in 1945 is not the cartoon villain of propaganda posters. He is exhausted, undersupplied, and medically unsupported, but he is also profoundly committed. Most of the defenders on Iwo Jima are conscripts, farmers and factory workers in their late teens and early 20s, but they have been told by their emperor that the entire nation is watching this island. Surrender is not an option because it has been removed from the vocabulary of acceptable action. Their officers have taught them that to die in place is not just duty, but transformation, a shedding of the mortal self that joins the spirit to the living Yamato. They have been trained not to emerge from their holes and charge, but to wait in silence for days, holding fire until a Marine is close enough to see the stitching on his jacket, and then to put 3 rounds through his chest and disappear back into the earth like a ghost. That's why, as the afternoon sun climbs over the island and the temperature on the black sand rises to nearly 120 degrees, you begin to realize that every boulder on this island is a potential bunker. Every shadow might be a firing slit. The terrain itself is a weapon, a labyrinth of ridges and ravines that Kuribayashi has named and numbered, assigning fields of fire that overlap like the strands of a spider's web. The Marines call it the arena because it feels less like a battlefield than a gladiatorial pit, where the audience is invisible and the sand is thirsty. By the end of the first day, you have crawled perhaps 200 yards inland. The cost of those 200 yards is almost 2,500 Americans killed or wounded. A butcher's bill, so staggering that the officers on the command ships refuse to believe the first reports. The 5th Marine Division has been chewed apart on the left flank. The 4th Division is stalled in the center. Only a few tanks have made it off the beach, and several of those are already burning, their crews roasting inside armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. The surf behind you is red with a slick that stretches out for 100 yards, and the evacuation boats are pulling wounded men in relays, their decks awash in blood so thick it drips through the scuppers. Night falls, and the real test begins. Because the Japanese do not sleep. This is a garrison that has learned to move through its tunnels in total darkness, navigating by touch and memory, slipping out through hidden vents to probe American lines with knives and grenades. You will learn to fear the small sounds, the scrape of a boot on rock, the clink of a canteen, the soft whisper of a fuse being lit in the dark. Men will die in their foxholes without ever making a sound, throats cut by an intruder who vanishes before the body is discovered. You will sleep with your bayonet fixed and your hand on the trigger, waking every 15 minutes to a world that is pitch black, freezing cold, and full of shadows that move when you stare at them. The first night on Iwo Jima is a descent into a new kind of war, not a contest of armies maneuvering in open fields, but a blind struggle in a honeycomb of rock where the enemy is everywhere and nowhere. Whatever you thought you knew about combat, about victory, about the clean lines between life and death, is about to be erased. The beach behind you is a graveyard. The airfields ahead are still Japanese. And somewhere deep beneath your boots, General Kuribayashi is listening to reports and adjusting his defenses with the patience of a man who intends to kill every single invader who sets foot on his island. But here is the thing. You don't know yet that 50 yards to your left, a couple of Marines are already planning something that will change the whole course of the battle. Something that will produce the most famous photograph in American history. And it's going to happen at the top of that volcano. Against every odd the island has stacked against you. But before that flag can rise, you'll have to survive the meat grinder. And the meat grinder hasn't even opened for business yet. The meat grinder has no walls and no roof, but it is the most enclosed killing floor the Marine Corps will ever know. It opens slowly, like an infection spreading beneath the skin, and you won't realize you are inside it until the exits have already closed behind you. The second morning on Iwo Jima breaks gray and overcast, the clouds so low they nearly scrape the ridges. You've survived the night, but survival is a relative term. Your body is discovering new registers of exhaustion, a fatigue so total that your eyelids scratch like sandpaper, and your fingers have forgotten how to uncurl from the rifle stock. Around you, the beach is a landscape that has divorced itself from the concept of order. Burned Amtraks lie belly up like dead beetles. Abandoned packs, dropped rifles, and scattered ammunition belts form a crust that crunches under your boots. The medical station behind the seawall is a sprawling open-air surgery where corpsmen work with their sleeves rolled up, arms red to the elbows, and the pile of discarded boots outside the aid tent grows taller by the hour. But you are not permitted to linger. There is a volcano to take. The plan, laid out in the wardrooms of the command ships, is elegantly simple on paper. The 4th and 5th Marine Divisions will push north across the island's broad center, while the 28th Marine Regiment peels south to isolate and capture Mount Suribachi. The volcano is the key, the high ground that commands every inch of the landing beach. As long as Japanese observers squat in its summit caves, they can direct artillery onto your supply lines with the precision of a man pointing a finger. So Suribachi must die first, and the 28th is given that honor. 5,000 men ordered to cross a half-mile of open ground, then scale a 500-foot rock pile whose every crevice spits fire. The morning push begins, and you are among them. The terrain between the beach and the mountain is a waste of volcanic rubble, boulders the size of small cars, and patches of coarse grass that hide spider holes with the patience of a trapdoor. Progress is measured not in yards but in individual deaths. A squad leader rises to signal a bound forward, and a bullet enters his left eye and exits the back of his skull before his arm is fully extended. His body drops without ceremony. The next man, a 19-year-old corporal with a wife in Kansas, he has mentioned 14 times since the transport ship, crawls forward to retrieve the fallen sergeant's map case, and a knee mortar shell lands so close that the concussion lifts him off the ground and sets him down with his leg twisted at an angle that makes your stomach lurch. He does not scream. The shock has closed his throat. He simply stares at the foot that is no longer aligned with his knee, and the corpsman who reaches him is already tying off a tourniquet before the white bone is fully visible. By the end of February 20th, the 28th has reached the base of the volcano. The cost is mounting, but the line holds, and the Japanese on the mountain are now cut off from the main garrison to the north. Kuribayashi has made a deliberate choice. Suribachi is a sacrifice. He has packed its tunnels with enough ammunition, food, and water to fight for 10 days, but he has drawn his main defensive line across the island's broad northern plateau. The commander of the Suribachi garrison, Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi, knows his role. He will hold the mountain until its garrison is ash, buying time for Kuribayashi to continue the killing in the north. No reinforcement will come. No withdrawal is permitted. The volcano is a cork in a bottle, and the cork is being hammered in. The assault on the mountain itself begins the next morning. You discover quickly that there is no path. The slopes are a 40-degree scramble of loose pumice and brush that tears your hands open. Every 10 feet, a cave mouth yawns open and vomits machine gun fire. The Japanese defenders are firing from positions that have been carved into the volcanic rock and covered with a foot of reinforced concrete. Their gun barrels camouflaged with ash and grass. You can stand 10 feet from a firing port and see nothing but a dark shadow that flickers. The answer, when it comes, is fire. The Marines have brought flamethrowers, 70-pound tanks of jellied gasoline strapped to men who must crawl within 20 yards of a bunker to use them. A flamethrower operator, you learn, has the life expectancy of a lit match in a high wind. Today, they are your saviors. A young man from Oregon, his face blackened with soot, scuttles forward behind a barrage of rifle grenades, raises his nozzle, and squeezes. A stream of burning fuel, 2,000 degrees at its core, lashes into the cave mouth. The scream that answers is not human in any register you recognize. It is a sound that bypasses the eardrum and lodges directly in the spine. Smoke, thick and greasy, billows from the opening, and the gun falls silent. For now, you will learn in the coming days that "for now" is the cruelest phrase on Iwo Jima. The tunnels connect. A bunker you clear in the morning is stealthily reoccupied by noon. The Japanese moving underground from a neighboring position, untouched by the flamethrower. Marines die walking past caves they assumed were dead. You learn to leave a squad behind at every position, and then another squad, until the advancing line thins to a thread and the battalion commander has no reserves left. But Suribachi cannot wait. The ascent continues through the afternoon of February 21st, a slow-motion crawl of grenade, flame, and bayonet. At dusk, the Marines are still only halfway up. The Japanese counterattack that night is a horror movie, played out in flickering shadows. Men boiling out of buried tunnels, wielding swords and bayonets, screaming curses you don't need a translation to understand. The fighting is hand to hand, intimate as a murder, and when it ends, the ground is littered with corpses so tangled that you can't tell which limbs belong to which body. The next morning, as the sun burns off the sea mist, you see the faces of the dead Japanese, up close for the first time. They are so young. Many look like teenagers. One clutches a photograph of a woman in a kimono, the image already darkening with blood. February 23rd dawns cold and clear. The 28th has fought its way to within striking distance of the summit. A patrol of 40 men, led by First Lieutenant Harold Schreier, is given the impossible: take the top of this mountain by noon. They start climbing, bypassing bunkers when they can, and somehow, astoundingly, they crest the rim to find the summit riddled with Japanese emplacements, but momentarily stunned by the audacity of their arrival. Schreier's men fan out, grenades flying, and after 40 minutes of chaos, the summit belongs to the Marines. They lash a small American flag to a piece of water pipe they find in a shell crater, and at 10:20 in the morning, the flag goes up. The sight lifts something off the men still fighting below. In the surf, sailors on landing craft stop their work and cheer. On the beaches, exhausted stretcher bearers look up at the flag, and some of them cry. A Navy photographer named Joe Rosenthal is scrambling up the slope, having heard that a flag is being raised. He misses the first one. But hours later, the battalion commander decides the flag is too small and sends up a larger one, a proper standard from a ship in the fleet. Rosenthal is there, and as the second flag goes up, he clicks his shutter. The photograph, 5 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman straining to push a pole into rocky soil, will become the defining image of the Pacific War. It will travel around the world, appear on postage stamps, and in time be cast in bronze for a monument in Arlington. But for you, crouching on the slopes of Suribachi with a canteen of warm water and a rifle that needs cleaning, the flag is not yet a symbol. It is a target. Japanese mortars are already ranging in on the summit. 3 of the 6 men who raised the flag will be dead before the battle ends. The photograph, for all its quiet triumph, is a picture taken in the middle of a slaughterhouse that has not yet finished its work, because the northern island has not moved. The main line of defense, which Kuribayashi has spent months designing, is still untouched. The meat grinder is waiting. To understand what the meat grinder is, you need to look north from Suribachi's summit, across the low, flat plain of the Motoyama airfields and into the broken badlands that rise toward the far shore. That terrain, a jumble of steep ridges, rocky outcroppings, and deep ravines is the fortress proper. Kuribayashi has divided his forces into independent strongpoints, each one a network of caves and bunkers engineered to be mutually supporting. Hill 382, a bald knob of rock and scrub, anchors the western end of the line. A series of lesser hills, gullies, and the feature the Marines will come to call the amphitheater radiate from it like spokes. Eastward, the line continues through a saddle known as the Turkey Knob and finishes at a low ridge that overlooks the sea. Kuribayashi's planners have named these positions with chilling poetry. The Golden Porcupine bristles with anti-tank guns. The crags are a maze of cliffs where a single machine gun can hold up an entire battalion. Every hill is zeroed. Every draw is a kill zone. The meat grinder itself is not a single hill, but a sector, a threshing floor where the 5th Marine Division will spend the next 2 weeks, feeding in companies and watching them come back in pieces. The official accounts will call it the assault on the 362C line, but the Marines on the ground will name it after what it does to human flesh. And you are about to enter it. The move north begins on February 25th, after Suribachi is fully secured. The 4th Division pushes up the center and right, the 5th on the left, and almost immediately, the war changes texture. The open ground of the beaches is gone. Now you are fighting through a landscape of narrow defiles, cliffs. You have to climb on your belly and scrub so thick that visibility drops to 10 feet. Tanks, which should be your only advantage, cannot follow you into the ravines without exposing their bellies to magnetically attached mines. The Japanese have hundreds of these mines, and they have trained special teams to sprint with them suicidally close because a single mine lodged in a tank's track can immobilize a column for hours. You watch a Sherman grind to a halt, its crew scrambling out, and before the hatches are fully open, a Japanese soldier has emerged from a nearby spider hole and is climbing onto the hull with a satchel charge. He detonates it, and the tank becomes a furnace. You remember the man's face, calm as a monk's, in the half-second before the explosion erased him. Infantry must clear the ground that tanks cannot traverse, and that means cave by cave, gully by gully combat that reduces warfare to its most primitive form. Men in holes killing men who want to drag them out. Your primary tools are the M1 Garand rifle, the bayonet, and the grenade. The grenade, you learn, is both a weapon and a language. You pitch one into a cave mouth, wait for the crumb, and then listen. Silence means nothing. It might mean you killed them. It might mean they are waiting deeper in the tunnel, ready to re-emerge the moment you pass. You learn to drop a second grenade, then a third, until you run out, and then you call for a flamethrower. The flamethrower operators, the men with the heavy tanks on their backs, are marked men. Japanese snipers target them first, and the liquid fuel can ignite if a bullet strikes it the wrong way. You have seen what happens when a flamethrower is hit. A sudden bright flower of fire, a man turning into a pillar of flame who runs, screaming, before he falls and lies still, burning long after death. The daily rhythm of the meat grinder is brutal and monotonous. At dawn, after a night of fitful sleep punctuated by infiltrators and mortar flares, the battalion rises and counts its losses. The company you started the week with had 235 men. By Wednesday, it has 103. By Friday, 7 of the 9 squad leaders are dead, and the acting platoon sergeant is a kid with a mispronounced name and a mustache that isn't growing yet. The replacements who arrive by landing craft are fresh-faced in clean dungarees, and the veterans watch them climb onto the beach with the haunted look of men who know what these newcomers do not. Half of them will be dead or wounded within 72 hours. The replacements are fed into the line in small packets, and the survivors do not bother to learn their names until they've made it through 3 days. Most don't. Water is a constant obsession. The island has no freshwater source beyond what the Japanese cisterns once held, and most of those have been destroyed or fouled. You carry 2 canteens, each holding a quart, and by mid-morning they are empty. You learn to sip from the sulphury water of shell craters, hoping the purification tablets you drop in are enough to kill whatever is breeding in the murk. Dysentery sweeps through the battalion, and men fight from foxholes with their trousers around their ankles, vomiting from heat exhaustion while their guts cramp. The dead are everywhere, and you cannot bury them. The ash soil is too shallow and the fighting too intense. Bodies of Japanese soldiers lie in the open, bloating, turning black in the sun, and the smell becomes a physical presence, a thick sweetness that clings to your clothes and hair and the back of your throat. You eat your cold rations sitting next to corpses, because there is nowhere else to sit. You stop noticing after a while. That, in itself, is terrifying. But the true horror of the meat grinder is this: you never see the enemy. Not really. Occasionally, a glimpse, a shape moving behind a rock, a helmet that ducks just as you fire. The Japanese know their terrain with the intimacy of men who have lived in it for months, and they fight from spider holes so well concealed that you can stand on one without knowing it until a hand reaches up and grabs your ankle. They have snipers lashed into the branches of the few stunted trees, wrapped in camouflage netting, who will lie motionless for 12 hours and then put a round through the base of a lieutenant's skull because he raised a map in plain sight. They have minefields marked on no Allied map, and the mines are sometimes made of ceramic so that mine detectors cannot find them. And as the days grind on and your company shrinks to a platoon-sized remnant, a single thought begins to calcify in your mind. The Japanese are not breaking. They are not wavering. The hoped-for collapse, the moment when the enemy's morale shatters and sends them fleeing in disarray, will never come. These men have signed their wills with their own blood before you arrived. They intend to die, and they intend to take you with them. One afternoon, your squad is ordered to clear a small ravine that the maps call Death Valley, a name so perfectly descriptive that it needs no explanation. The ravine is a V-shaped cut in the earth, choked with boulders and spent shell casings. The Japanese have a heavy machine gun positioned in a concrete bunker at the head of the valley, its field of fire covering the entire approach. 2 previous assaults have already failed. The evidence lying in the open. 7 Marines crumpled in the ravine floor, their bodies bloated and fly-blown because no one can reach them to drag them out. Your platoon sergeant, a wiry man from Texas named something you've forgotten because everyone just calls him Sarge, lays out a plan with the bone-tired calm of someone who has explained this plan too many times. A base of fire from the right, a smoke screen to the left, and a 3-man assault team with a satchel charge, crawling up the center ditch in the hope that the smoke and the noise will give them enough seconds to reach the bunker and stuff the charge inside. You are one of the 3. The crawling takes forever. The shriek of friendly machine gun fire flies a few feet above your head, and the Japanese gun replies, the rounds punching into the dirt beside your elbow. The smoke is gray and thick and tastes like burnt oil. Your heart is hammering so hard that your vision is pulsing. You reach the bunker. You think, miraculously, a gray concrete slab with a dark slit that stinks of cordite. You don't have time to be afraid. You pull the fuse igniter. The satchel charge is in your hand, and you shove it into the slit. You roll away, pressing yourself into a shallow fold in the earth. And the explosion that follows is so close, it feels like a hand slapping your entire body. Dust and rock pelt your back. The machine gun stops. You have done it, and then, before you can even exhale, rifle fire erupts from a cave you didn't see, 40 yards to your left, and the other 2 men in your assault team are hit almost simultaneously. One slumps forward, a tiny round hole in his temple. The other takes a round through the shoulder and begins screaming, a raw animal sound that rises above the gunfire. You drag him back somehow, with your hands slipping in his blood, and by the time you reach the fire base, you are both painted red. The ravine is technically cleared. The cost was 2 dead, 3 wounded. The bunker will be reoccupied tonight through a connecting tunnel you didn't know existed. Tomorrow, another squad will have to take this ground again. That is the meat grinder. It eats ground and bodies alike, and it never stays full. You are losing your sense of time. Days blur into a single continuous present of heat, noise, and the weight of your gear. Nights are worse. The Japanese do not sleep, and their infiltration tactics grow more desperate and more effective. You have learned to recognize the sound of a Japanese soldier crawling through the wire. A soft rustle, a pause, a rustle. You throw grenades at sounds and sometimes hit nothing, sometimes hit a man who screams in a language you don't speak. One night, a Japanese officer leading a small raiding party navigates entirely through your company's lines, enters the battalion aid station, and kills 2 horsemen and 3 wounded men before he is brought down by a Marine who fires his pistol through the tent canvas. The raid sows a particular kind of dread. Nowhere is safe. Not even the places where you go to be saved. And then there is the psychological war, a dimension you did not train for. The Japanese are masters of it. At night you hear them calling out in accented English, taunting the Marines by name, promising a quick death if you surrender, describing in graphic detail what will happen if you don't. They shout the names of companies they've heard over radio intercepts, the names of commanders, the hometowns of dead Marines found on letters taken from bodies. The effect is corrosive. You start to feel that the enemy knows you, that he is inside your head, that the island itself is whispering secrets you desperately want to forget. By the end of the first week of March, the meat grinder has ground down both sides to a thin paste of survivors. But the Marines are still advancing. Hill 382 has fallen after a series of assaults, so costly that the regimental combat team has lost more than half its strength. The amphitheater is partially in American hands. The turret, a rocky knob that has changed possession 4 times, is finally being held, its slopes paved with dead. But the advance is measured in hundreds of yards per day, and you can feel the battle approaching a crisis. The Japanese, their supplies dwindling, their commanders dead, are now defending with the intensity of men who have nothing left to lose. And somewhere in the northernmost reaches of the island, in a deep command post carved into a ravine, General Kuribayashi still lives. He still sends orders. He still commands. The intelligence reports suggest he has fewer than 3,000 effective soldiers remaining, but they are dug into a nightmare terrain called Bloody Gorge, and the final act of this battle is shaping up to make everything you've already endured look like a warm-up. But before you reach that gorge, you will witness a moment that will break your understanding of what human beings are capable of. It will happen on a small hill that doesn't even have a name, and it will involve a man you've only just met, a replacement with a Bible in his pack, and a laugh that sounds like hope. And his choice will ask you a question you still don't know how to answer. The hill doesn't even have a name. It's just a knob of black rock and stunted brush, designated on the map as a contour line with an elevation, but for the men who fight on it during the second week of March, it will become a private geography of grief. You are there, in a shallow fighting hole scraped into the ash, when the replacement arrives. He's a kid, maybe 19, with a face that hasn't yet learned to hold the weight of what it's seeing. He carries a dog-eared Gideon Bible in his breast pocket, not tucked away but wedged there, openly, the black cover curling with sweat. His laugh, when he introduces himself, is a clean, nervous thing that belongs in a diner back home, not in a pit of volcanic grit where the bodies haven't been collected yet. You don't ask his name. You've stopped asking names. The morning is quiet, a dangerous quiet. The Japanese on this knob have been firing sporadically from a cave entrance that opens like a throat halfway up the slope. 2 squads have already tried to silence it. Both were cut down by crossfire from a hidden machine gun that only speaks when Marines are fully exposed. The kid with the Bible listens to the plan, smoke, a satchel charge, same as always, and he volunteers to carry the charge. You watch him go, crawling low, the satchel clutched against his chest like a child, and when he gets close enough, he does something that makes no tactical sense. He stops. He stands up. He walks directly toward the cave mouth, his arms spread wide, the satchel charge dangling from one hand. He is shouting in broken Japanese, words he must have memorized from a phrasebook. Surrender. You will be treated fairly. Your war is over. The hillside holds its breath. Even the machine gun pauses as though the gunner is as baffled as you are. For 3 long seconds, the kid stands there with the black hole of the cave yawning in front of him, his Bible outlined against his chest, and you think, God, he might actually do it. He might actually talk them out. Then the cave speaks. A single shot, a rifle round that catches him just beneath the collarbone, and he folds like a paper figure, the satchel charge falling from his hand and tumbling down the slope. He doesn't die instantly. You watch him try to crawl, one arm dragging, his mouth forming words that might be prayers. A second shot catches him in the head, and he goes still. The Bible, jarred loose from his pocket, slides a few feet downhill and comes to rest open-faced in the black sand, its pages lifting and falling in the hot wind. You will not retrieve his body until after dark, when a volunteer team crawls out under a moonless sky and drags him back by his collar. The question his choice asks you, why would a man do that, walk into death with words instead of a weapon, is not a question you can answer. It lodges in your chest like shrapnel, and it stays there, a splinter of doubt in a war that has already taken everything else you believed about the world. You realize, in the awful stillness that follows, that the Japanese will never surrender. Not because they are monsters, but because they have been shaped by a code that sees surrender as a living death worse than the bullet. And if they will not break, then this battle will not end until one side is physically extinct. That realization settles over you like a second skin, and you carry it as you leave the nameless hill and rejoin the grinding horror of the meat grinder. The days that follow are an unholy fusion of monotony and sudden violence. Your universe has shrunk to a sector of broken ground no larger than a few football fields, but every yard of it is lethal. The fighting is a slow-motion disassembly of the human body, piece by piece. You see a man take a round through the jaw and continue to fire his weapon with his face hanging open, because the adrenaline has not yet let him feel the pain. You see a corpsman sprint through a mortar barrage to reach a screaming patient, only to step on a mine that separates his leg at the knee. He continues to crawl toward the wounded man, dragging his own stump until the blood loss blurs his eyes and he collapses. You see a sergeant, calm as a Sunday school teacher, walk into a bunker with a satchel charge, emerge without it, and then sit down on a rock to light a cigarette before realizing that his left arm is missing below the elbow. He looks at the stump with mild curiosity, says something you can't hear, and then passes out. The mental toll is becoming as lethal as the physical. Men are breaking in ways that have no visible wound. You watch a battle-hardened lieutenant, a man who has led his platoon through 3 amphibious landings, suddenly sit down in the middle of a firefight and refuse to move. He is not wounded. He is not afraid in the sense of panic. He has simply reached a limit, a wall that his mind has constructed without consulting his will, and beyond that wall there is no possibility of forward motion. He sits, rocking slightly, humming a tune you recognize as a hymn, while bullets chip the rocks around him, and eventually 2 Marines have to physically drag him to the rear. He is diagnosed with combat fatigue, the catch-all phrase that covers psyches shattered beyond repair, and he will spend the rest of his life in a veterans' hospital, still humming that hymn. The Japanese, you learn, have no such safety valve. Their doctrine has no category for psychological breakdown. A soldier who cannot fight is a soldier who has failed, and failure is washed away only by death. This, you come to understand, is why they fight the way they do. It is not fanaticism, not in the way the propaganda films paint it. It is a total absence of alternatives. The Japanese soldier on Iwo Jima has been told that his emperor is a god, that his ancestors are watching, and that the only acceptable action is to die where he stands, taking as many Americans as possible with him. There is no rear area, no evacuation, no medical treatment beyond what a dying man can do for himself. Wounded Japanese soldiers, you have heard, are sometimes given a grenade and left behind to detonate it when Americans approach. You have seen the evidence, bodies with their own hands blown off, the pins still clutched in rigid fingers. But the worst revelation comes when you stumble across a Japanese field hospital that has been overrun. It is not a hospital in any sense you would recognize. It is a cave, deep and damp, the walls sweating with condensation, and inside it are the dying. They lie on straw mats, their wounds crawling with maggots, their faces gaunt with starvation. There is no medicine, there is no food. Some of them are so far gone that they cannot lift their heads. A few have written final letters to their families, the papers stained with blood and tears, asking their wives to remarry, their children to be brave, their parents to forgive them for not dying more gloriously. You stand in that cave, a rifle in your hand, and you feel something unexpected, not pity exactly, but a hollow recognition. These men are as trapped as you are. They are fighting a war they cannot escape, and the only exit they are permitted has already been chosen for them. But the battle does not pause for introspection. The meat grinder continues to eat, and by the middle of March, the two Marine divisions have advanced far enough to begin squeezing the Japanese into an ever smaller pocket in the island's northern tip. The terrain here is the worst yet, a nightmarish jumble of ravines, cliffs, and broken plateaus that the Marines will name Bloody Gorge. This is Kuribayashi's final redoubt, the place he has chosen to make his last stand. And it is here that the battle will descend into its darkest chapter. The approach to the gorge is a killing field of open ground, swept by interlocking machine gun fire from positions that have been cut into the rock and reinforced with steel beams, salvaged from the airfields. The Japanese have placed their remaining artillery deep in the ravines, their barrels angled almost vertically to drop shells directly onto the Americans crawling above them. Tanks cannot operate in the twisted terrain. Flamethrowers must be carried by men who are exposed to fire from multiple directions. The only way forward is a direct infantry assault, body by body, and the cost is immediate and staggering. You watch a battalion advance across a saddle between two ridges, and within 10 minutes, a third of its men are down. The survivors press on, climbing hand over hand up a slope of loose scree, and when they reach the top, they find that the Japanese have dug in on the reverse slope, waiting. The fighting becomes a close-range massacre, rifles fired from 5 yards away, bayonets driven through chests, men rolling and wrestling on the ground like animals. By the time the ridge is secured, the battalion's command structure has been virtually erased. The colonel is dead, both majors are wounded, and the senior officer remaining is a 23-year-old captain with a field promotion and a 1,000-yard stare. Meanwhile, the Japanese defenders are experiencing their own private apocalypse. Their food has been gone for more than a week. Their water is a memory. Men are drinking from filthy puddles and licking the condensation from cave walls. Dysentery and starvation are weakening them faster than American bullets. The commander of the surviving forces, that brilliant and unyielding General Kuribayashi, knows the end is near. On March 16th, he sends a final radio message to the Japanese command on Chichijima, the nearest island still in imperial hands. The message, intercepted and decoded by American intelligence, is a farewell. We have not eaten or drunk for 5 days. Our fighting spirit is still high. We are going to fight bravely to the last moment. I, as commander, apologize to all the officers and men for their great efforts. The transmission ends with a traditional death poem, a haiku written in the general's own hand. Unable to complete this heavy task, I must leave the future in your hands. But Kuribayashi does not surrender. He orders his remaining troops, now reduced to perhaps 3,000 men, huddled in the gorge, to fight to the death. And they obey. The final Japanese resistance takes on a quality of desperation that is beyond military logic. Small groups of soldiers, armed with nothing but swords and sharpened bamboo stakes, launch hopeless nighttime charges into marine lines. They are cut down by the dozens, but they keep coming. A group of Japanese sailors, stranded on the island without their ships, fight with captured American weapons and die to the last man. A unit of Korean laborers, forcibly conscripted by the Japanese military, is found dead in a collapsed tunnel, having been ordered to hold a position that had no strategic value. The battle has become a slaughter, and the slaughter is mutual. For you, the days inside Bloody Gorge blur into a single continuous nightmare. You sleep in short, fitful bursts, wedged between rocks, your rifle in your hands because to put it down is to invite a knife in the dark. The smell is so pervasive that you've stopped recognizing it. The sweet rot of the dead, the chemical bite of explosives, the sulfur that seeps from the ground itself. Your uniform is stiff with dried blood, most of it not your own. Your feet are rotting inside your boots from the constant damp. You have not eaten a hot meal in 3 weeks. You have not heard a piece of music, seen a woman's face, or felt anything resembling safety since the first moment you climbed into the landing craft. You are, in every meaningful sense, no longer the person who left boot camp. That person has been scraped away, layer by layer, until only a core of animal instinct remains. Fight, survive, protect the man next to you, and do not think beyond the next 30 seconds because beyond that lies a void. And then, on the morning of March 25th, something shifts. The Japanese fire, which has been constant and withering, begins to slacken. There are fewer snipers, fewer mortar rounds. Small pockets of enemy soldiers are found dead in their caves, not from American weapons but from self-inflicted wounds. A grenade held to the stomach, a bayonet thrust into the throat. Some have performed the ritual of seppuku, their bodies arranged with a sword across their chests. The gorge, which has been a screaming hell for weeks, is falling silent. A patrol pushes into the deepest ravines and finds a scene of absolute devastation. The Japanese dead are everywhere, piled in caves and sprawled across the rocks. Some are mere skeletons, their flesh consumed by maggots and time. Others are freshly dead, their wounds still wet. Among them, you find evidence of the final breakdown of discipline. Men who fought each other over a canteen, men who killed their own wounded to end their suffering. Men who wrote final letters in their own blood because there was no ink left. One cave contains the remains of a command post, and near the entrance, wrapped in a blanket and missing his head, is the body of a senior officer. The intelligence will later suggest, though it can never be proven absolutely, that this was General Kuribayashi himself, who chose to die in a final banzai charge rather than face capture. His body, like so many others on this island, will never be positively identified. The rock has swallowed him whole. That night, the Japanese launch one last attack. It is a desperate, ragged affair. Perhaps 300 men, many of them wounded, some barely able to walk, charging the marine lines with fixed bayonets and screams that carry a raw, unbearable grief. The Marines, exhausted beyond words, cut them down. By dawn, the attack is over. Bodies lie in heaps before the American positions, and the few survivors who crawled back into the caves will die there in the darkness, alone. The battle for Iwo Jima, after 36 days of continuous combat, is officially about to end. But here is the truth that the official reports will never fully capture. Even as the island is declared secure on March 26th, the dying is not over. Thousands of Japanese soldiers, perhaps as many as 3,000, are still alive in the tunnels, too wounded or too committed to surrender. For months afterward, U.S. Army garrison troops, the 147th Infantry Regiment, will hunt these holdouts through the caves. They will call themselves the Cavemen, and their war will continue long after the generals have moved on to Okinawa. Some Japanese soldiers will not emerge until 1949, 4 years after the war itself has ended. The island, for all its silence, will keep its secrets. But you, the Marine crouching in a foxhole on March 26th, do not know any of that yet. What you know is this: the shooting has stopped. The sun is rising. You are still alive. And somewhere in the mess tent behind the lines, someone is cooking the first hot breakfast you will have seen in over a month. The price you paid for this breakfast is etched into the ash around you. 6,821 American dead, nearly 20,000 wounded. The Japanese garrison, 21,000 strong when you landed, has been almost completely annihilated. You have survived, but survival, you are beginning to realize, is not the same as winning. Because the things you saw and did in the meat grinder, in the gorge, on that nameless hill with the kid and his Bible, those things are not finished with you. They have taken up residence in your bones, and they will live there for the rest of your life. And now, as the silence spreads across the black sand and the smell of coffee drifts on the morning air, you face the hardest question of all. What happens when a man walks off an island like this one? What does he bring back with him? And can he ever truly leave? The hot breakfast arrives in a mess tin that has seen better days, and you eat it standing up, because sitting still feels like an invitation to collapse. The coffee is bitter and scalding, the powdered eggs taste like chalk and salt. But it is the first food you have swallowed in 36 days that wasn't cold rations eaten next to a corpse. You don't taste it so much as you register the absence of the other thing, the thing that has been coating your tongue since the first morning on the beach. That taste, ash, cordite, the sweet copper of blood, is finally fading, but it will never be gone entirely. You will taste it in your dreams for the next 70 years. Around you, the island is undergoing a transformation that seems almost obscene in its efficiency. Bulldozers are already scraping new roads through the black sand. Engineers are patching the airfields with crushed coral and asphalt. The first B-29, a wounded bird limping back from a raid over Tokyo, touches down on March 4th, even before the battle has officially ended. By the time the last shot is fired, more than 2,000 superfortresses will have made emergency landings on Iwo Jima, carrying 24,000 airmen who would otherwise have ditched in the vast Pacific. The strategic math, the cold calculation that sent you onto this beach, has been vindicated. The island is saving lives by the thousands, even as it is still being cleared of the dead. But you are not here to see the airfields or count the bombers. You are here to bury your friends. The cemeteries sprout on the island like small, neat cities of white crosses. The 3rd Marine Division Cemetery opens first, then the 4th, then the 5th. Row after row, the graves stretch across the flattened ground, each one marked with a temporary wooden cross and a dog tag nailed to the center. The chaplains work in shifts, reading over the dead in rotation, their voices hoarse and breaking. You attend services for men whose faces you can still see, whose last words you can still hear, and the prayers wash over you like a foreign language. God, you think, has not been on this island for a very long time. The Japanese dead are a different problem. There are too many to bury individually, and many are entombed in collapsed tunnels that will never be excavated. Bulldozers push mass graves into the volcanic soil, and the chaplains say words over those too, because a dead enemy is still a dead man. You watch a Marine, a Catholic from Boston, kneel beside a Japanese body and press a rosary into its cold hand before the dozer blade covers it. He does not explain himself. He does not need to. The survivors of the Japanese garrison, the few who emerge or are captured, are a spectral presence on the island. Most are too weak to walk. Some are literally carried from their caves by American soldiers who, hours earlier, were trying to kill them. A A young Japanese private, barely 16, is found wandering naked and delirious, his uniform rotted off his body. He is given water, wrapped in a blanket, and gently led to a holding area where he stares at his captors with eyes that hold no comprehension of mercy. He has been told his entire life that Americans are devils who torture and eat their prisoners. The fact that they are instead giving him food and medical care is a reality his mind cannot process. He will eventually be repatriated to Japan, where he will become a schoolteacher, and for the rest of his life he will tell his students a strange story about the kindness of enemies. For you, the process of leaving the island begins without ceremony. One day, your name appears on a roster. You board a landing craft, the same kind that brought you here, and you do not look back at the beach. The transport ship is clean and white and smells of disinfectant. There are bunks with actual mattresses. There is hot water. You stand under the shower for 45 minutes, watching the black grit spiral down the drain, and when you finally step out, you catch your reflection in a mirror and do not recognize the face staring back. The man in the mirror is gaunt, hollow-eyed, and he has forgotten how to smile. He looks like a ghost who has not yet realized he is dead. The voyage home is a strange suspended purgatory. The ship is filled with men who have survived the worst battle in Marine Corps history, and yet no one speaks of it. You play cards. You read old magazines. You stare at the horizon and feel the vibration of the engines through the deck plates. At night, men scream in their sleep, and no one mentions it at breakfast. The unwritten code is already forming. What happened on Iwo Jima stays on Iwo Jima. If you talk about it, you will break. And if you break, you will be no use to anyone, least of all yourself. So you lock it down, bury it deep, and hope that the weight of silence will eventually crush the memory into something small enough to carry. When the ship docks at Pearl Harbor, there is a band playing and nurses waving from the pier. You walk down the gangplank, and a Red Cross volunteer presses a cup of cold milk into your hand. The milk is sweet and cold, and it tastes like a country you had forgotten existed. You drink it in one long gulp, and then you cry. Not a dramatic, shoulder-heaving cry, but a quiet leak of tears that you wipe away with the back of your hand before anyone can see. You are not sure why you are crying. Relief, maybe. Grief. The sudden, unbearable contrast between where you have been and where you are now. The milk is cold. The milk is cold, and you are alive, and 6,821 men are not. The months that follow are a slow, painful reassembly of the person you used to be. The Marine Corps gives you leave, gives you medals, gives you a paper that says you are a hero. You go home. Your mother hugs you so hard that your ribs ache, and she says, "You look thin," and you say you are fine, and the lie tastes like ash. Your old friends want to know what it was like, and you tell them a cleaned-up version, a highlight reel of bravery and camaraderie that leaves out the bodies, the smell, the kid with the Bible. They wouldn't understand. You barely understand yourself. At night, you are back on the island. The dreams are so vivid that you wake up smelling cordite. You hear the snap of a Nambu machine gun and the wet thump of a knee mortar. You see the faces of the dead, their mouths moving, asking you something you can't quite hear. You start sleeping on the floor because the bed is too soft, too safe, and safety feels like a trap. You startle at loud noises. You scan crowds for threats that aren't there. You are home, but home is a foreign country now, and you are a permanent exile from the place you left behind. You are not alone in this. Across the country, tens of thousands of men are returning from the Pacific with the same hollow look, the same 1,000-yard stare. They gather in VFW halls and American Legion posts, and they drink too much and say too little. Sometimes, late at night, one of them will start talking, a name, a place, a single moment of horror, and the others will nod in recognition. They share a language that no one else speaks. They are the survivors, and survival has marked them with a scar that no medal can cover. The physical wounds are easier to see. In the naval hospitals, wards are filled with young men missing limbs, their stumps wrapped in white gauze, their eyes fixed on ceilings, while they learn to imagine a future that doesn't include 2 functioning legs. Physical therapists coach them through exercises. Prosthetic limbs, crude but functional, are fitted and refitted. Some men adapt with astonishing speed, cracking jokes and flirting with nurses. Others retreat into silence, speaking only to ask for more morphine. The lucky ones, if you can call them that, are the ones whose wounds are visible. Because visible wounds can be treated, the invisible wounds, the ones that live in the amygdala, in the nervous system, in the deep primitive core of the brain that learned on Iwo Jima that the world is a place of constant lethal threat, those wounds have no treatment in 1945. They don't even have a name. The phrase post-traumatic stress disorder is still decades away. For now, it's just called combat fatigue, or shell shock, or, most commonly, nothing at all. The men who carry it are simply expected to get over it, to be men, to move on. Some of them do. They find jobs, start families, build lives that look normal from the outside. Their children will grow up knowing only that Dad was in the war and doesn't like to talk about it. They will notice that Dad flinches at fireworks, that he sits facing the door in every restaurant, that he wakes in the night with a shout and then insists it was nothing. They will love him and fear him in equal measure, and they will never fully understand the geography of the island that still lives inside his head. Others cannot manage even that. The weight of what they saw is too heavy, the silence too complete. They drink themselves into oblivion, or they disappear into the margins of society, or they sit in their basements with a pistol on the table and wait for the courage to use it. The suicide rate among Iwo Jima veterans will never be accurately counted, but those who know, know. The island keeps claiming victims long after the last bullet has been fired. But there is another story, a parallel story that runs alongside the grief. It is the story of what the survivors built. In the decades after the war, the men who fought on Iwo Jima, the ones who clawed their way off the black sand and carried the island home inside them, became the backbone of a generation. They became teachers, doctors, tradesmen, fathers. They built suburbs and highways and a new American prosperity. They didn't talk about the war, but they lived its lessons every day. The value of the man next to you, the necessity of endurance, the understanding that some things are worth fighting for, even when the cost is unspeakable. They raised their children with a quiet, unshakable resolve, and they passed on a code that they never wrote down, but that their families absorbed anyway. Show up, do the work, protect the people you love, and don't complain. The island had taught them that complaining was pointless, because things could always get worse, and so they simply kept going. The battle itself became legend. Joe Rosenthal's photograph of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi was reproduced on posters, postage stamps, and bond drive advertisements. It became the symbol not just of the battle, but of the entire Marine Corps, an image of collective effort and quiet heroism that captured something essential about the American spirit. 3 of the 6 men in that photograph, Franklin Sousley, Harlan Block, and Michael Strank, would be dead within weeks. A 4th, Ira Hayes, would struggle for years with the burden of being a symbol, drowning his pain in alcohol before dying at the age of 32. The photograph, for all its beauty, was a picture of men who were already being consumed by the thing they were fighting. It remains the most reproduced image in the history of photography, and it hangs today in the halls of the Marine Corps Museum as both a tribute and a warning. This is what victory costs. The Medals of Honor, awarded for Iwo Jima, number 27. More than any other single battle in American history. 22 of those were given to Marines, 5 to Navy corpsmen. 2 of them were awarded to men who threw themselves on grenades to save their buddies. One was given to a flamethrower operator who, already mortally wounded, continued to crawl toward a bunker and burned it out before dying. The citations read like distilled poetry of sacrifice, conspicuous gallantry, above and beyond the call of duty, unflinching devotion. They are words that strain to contain the enormity of what they describe. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the commander of the Pacific Fleet, would later say of Iwo Jima that uncommon valor was a common virtue. It is the most famous line ever spoken about the battle, and it has been quoted so often that its meaning has dulled. But when Nimitz said it, he was standing on the island itself, looking at the black sand and the white crosses, and he understood precisely what those words meant. Valor had been so common on Iwo Jima that it had become almost invisible, a baseline expectation that men met and exceeded every single day, until heroism was indistinguishable from simple survival. Every Marine who stayed on that beach, who crawled forward under fire, who dragged a wounded body to cover, or shared his last canteen of water, or charged a bunker with nothing but a satchel charge and heart, had performed an act of valor. Most of their names will never be known. The common virtue of uncommon courage is the secret architecture of the battle, and it holds up the entire terrible edifice. You, the Marine who walked off the island and tried to leave it behind, will carry that architecture inside you. The years will pass. The war will end in August of 1945. You will hear the news of Hiroshima and Nagasaki while you are still in recovery, and you will feel a strange, complicated tangle of emotions: relief that the killing is over, horror at the scale of the new weapon, and a grim understanding that Iwo Jima, for all its blood, was a preview of what the invasion of the Japanese home islands would have been. The casualty projections for that invasion ran into the millions. The black sand, in its way, helped make the case for the bomb. You don't know how to feel about that, so you feel nothing, and you file it away, and you move on. You will grow old. You will attend reunions, fewer and fewer, each year as the ranks thin. You will stand in the crowd at the dedication of the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington in 1954, looking up at the bronze figures of the flag raisers, and you will see in their frozen faces something that no one else in the crowd can see: the knowledge of what came after the shutter clicked. You will watch your children graduate from college, and you will hold your grandchildren, and you will marvel at the quiet ordinariness of a life that you never expected to have. Sometimes, at the very end, when you are an old man in a chair by a window, the dreams will still come. The black sand, the sulfur wind, the sound of the surf mixing with the sound of the guns. You will wake, briefly disoriented, and then you will remember where you are. You are home. You are safe. The island is far away, and its dead are at peace, and so, finally, are you. But before that peace can come, there is one last thing that must be said about Iwo Jima. A fact so strange and so improbable that it sounds like a myth, but it is true. In 1949, 4 years after the war ended, a small group of Japanese soldiers emerged from a cave on the northern end of the island. They had been living underground for nearly half a decade, subsisting on roots and insects, and whatever they could scavenge. They had not known the war was over. They had heard rumors, muffled radio broadcasts, the distant sound of American voices, but they had dismissed it all as enemy propaganda. They were soldiers of the Emperor, and they had orders to hold that position until relieved. They held it for 4 years. When they finally surrendered, led blinking into the sunlight by an American patrol, one of them asked, almost casually, whether Japan had won. He had to be told, gently, that Japan had lost, that the Emperor was no longer a god, that the world he had known was gone. He wept. The American soldiers who received his surrender did not mock him. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, what it meant to be trapped on that island. That image, the last Japanese soldier stepping into the light, leaving behind the darkness of the cave and entering a world that had moved on without him, is the final word on Iwo Jima. The battle did not end on March 26, 1945. It echoed for years, in the tunnels and in the minds of the men who fought there. It echoes still, in the black sand that shifts with the tide, in the memorials that stand in Arlington, and on the island itself, in the DNA of the Marine Corps, which measures every battle since against the impossible standard set on that sulphurous rock. The men who fought there are almost all gone now, their voices fading into history. But if you walk on that beach today, you can still feel them. The sand remembers. It always will. The sand remembers. It always will. But memory, like the black ash of Iwo Jima, works in strange and patient ways. Today, if you were to stand on that same beach where the first wave landed, you would hear nothing but wind and the rhythmic hush of a placid sea. The volcanic grit is still there, shifting underfoot, softer than it has any right to be for a substance that drank so much human blood. The island is empty now, a Japanese maritime self-defense outpost with a handful of caretakers and a landing strip that sees only occasional visitors. The tunnels are mostly sealed, their entrances collapsed or welded shut, and what remains of the subterranean fortress is a haunted labyrinth known only to the crabs and the ghosts. But the ghosts are real, even if you can't see them. They're in the rusted remnants of a flamethrower half buried in the scree, in the faded kanji still visible on a bunker wall, in the way the light hits the summit of Mount Suribachi at dawn and catches something that might be a memory. The Battle of Iwo Jima ended nearly 8 decades ago, and yet it refuses to become ancient history. It remains the single most intense distillation of what the Pacific War was. A collision of two utterly opposed doctrines of combat, fought on a speck of land so remote and so desolate that its name, in Japanese, means Sulphur Island. The Marines who went ashore in February 1945 were not just fighting for an airstrip, they were fighting against an enemy who had turned the very geology of the island into a weapon. And the Japanese who defended it were not merely holding a position, they were enacting a philosophy that saw death in place as the fulfillment of a sacred duty. The result was a battle that defied every pre-invasion prediction, shattered every assumption about how long a fortified island could hold out, and produced casualties so staggering that the numbers still have the power to shock. 24,053 American casualties, including over 6,000 killed. An entire Japanese garrison annihilated, save for a few hundred prisoners. 36 days of continuous, grinding subterranean combat. 27 medals of honor. And one photograph that would come to define the Marine Corps for all time. But the numbers, impressive as they are, don't capture the human reality. What happened on Iwo Jima was not a mathematical equation. It was a collective trauma that imprinted itself on an entire generation. The men who survived carried the island with them in ways that were invisible but indelible. They lived the rest of their lives with the sound of knee mortars, the smell of burning fuel, the image of friends falling into black ash, and they passed that burden down, not through stories, most of them never spoke of it, but through the simple, stoic act of continuing to live. They married, they worked, they raised families, and they taught their children, without ever saying it aloud, what it means to endure. That quiet endurance is the real monument to Iwo Jima, more lasting than bronze or granite. If you look closely, you can still find its traces everywhere. In the design of the M16 rifle, which learned from the weight and recoil of the M1 Garand that every Marine carried on the black sand. In the doctrine of amphibious assault, which was rewritten in blood on those beaches and later applied at Incheon and beyond. In the very DNA of the Marine Corps, which to this day measures its recruits against the impossible standards set by the men who crawled into the meat grinder. When a modern Marine sings the hymn and hears the line about the shores of Tripoli, they are also thinking, whether they know it or not, of the beaches of Iwo Jima. there is a lingering question that the battle leaves behind, one that has no easy answer. Was it worth it? The strategic calculus was clear. The island saved the lives of more than 24,000 American airmen who made emergency landings there before the war ended. The strategic bombing campaign against Japan was made immeasurably more effective by the presence of fighter escorts and emergency strips on Iwo Jima. The invasion of the home islands, had it proceeded, would have made Iwo Jima look like a skirmish. And yet, for the families of the dead, for the men who came home with limbs missing and minds shattered, the cost was absolute. The island's legacy is that we will never be able to separate the valor from the horror, the necessity from the grief. They are fused together like the volcanic ash that swallowed both sides, American and Japanese alike, into a common earth. Perhaps the most enduring lesson of Iwo Jima is not about strategy or heroism, but about shared humanity. On that island, two armies fought with a ferocity that seemed to deny any common ground. And yet, when it was over, American Marines knelt beside Japanese bodies and pressed rosaries into their hands. When the last holdouts emerged in 1949, they were greeted not with vengeance but with gentleness. The boys who had been taught that their enemies were devils found, in the end, that they were just boys. That recognition, hard-won and fragile, is perhaps the only redemption the island ever offered. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, wrapped in the safety of your blankets, consider what it means to be here. The fact that you can close your eyes without fear, drift off without listening for the scrape of a bayonet in the night, is a gift that was bought on islands like Iwo Jima. The distance between a warm bed and a foxhole on a freezing, sulphurous rock is measured not in miles but in the choices of the men who crossed that beach. You are the heir of their endurance. Your quiet, ordinary evening is the thing they were fighting for, even if they couldn't put it into words. Before you go, if you've drifted this far and found yourself still listening, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It tells the algorithm that these long, quiet walks through the darker corners of history are worth the telling, and it helps this strange little corner of the internet keep the lights on. Drop a comment below telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing the map of sleepless souls stretch from country to country, all of us bound by the same strange ritual. Lying awake while the world sleeps, exploring the past so we can better understand the present. Now dim your lights, if you haven't already, pull your blankets close. Let the weight of the day slip off your shoulders. And as you settle into that soft, safe space between waking and dreaming, remember the black sand. Remember the tunnels. Remember the men who walked into the meat grinder and the ones who walked out changed. The island is quiet now. The guns have been silent for decades, but if you listen carefully, in the stillness just before sleep, you might hear the echo of a voice from a foxhole on a long-ago morning. We're still here. We made it home. And so will you. Sleep well.